everybody. It is 6 o'clock, and we are going to begin our Andrew Jackson and Westward expansion test review session. I'm not expecting, this is a little bit earlier than normal, so I know I'm not expecting as many people joining us on the live, but I am hoping that you will watch this either tonight or tomorrow night to prepare for your test. A couple of quick reminders about the test itself. This is your last test of this grading period. This is your last opportunity to get your testing average up, or your last opportunity to keep it up. And there may not be a lot of opportunity to redo this test. So it's important that you study and do your absolute best. So we're going to start with talking about Andrew Jackson, 7th President of the United States. Nicknamed Andrew, I do what I want, Jackson. As we were reading the essays, about Andrew Jackson, I noticed that there's still a lot of confusion about a couple things. So I'm going to address a couple things right off the bat. And the first one I really want to do is the Native Americans situation with Andrew Jackson. I'm going to start with that because, again, this is something I noticed there was a lot of confusion about. There are 3 separate events related to the Native Americans with Andrew Jackson. And in y'all's essays, you often conflated these into one event. But there are 3 separate events related to Native Americans with Andrew Jackson. Okay. The first one is Worcester v. Georgia, the Supreme Court case. Worcester v. Georgia is the Supreme Court case that says that the federal government has authority over the Native American tribes. It tells Georgia they can't kick the Native American tribes out because the federal government has a treaty with these people. So the federal government has authority over Native tribes. And remember, we do the won't go is this one. Won't go is our strategy for this with the big O, W-O, and then the G. And then we do the arrows from the G to the O. Okay. So that's Worcester v. Georgia. So that's the first event. Okay, it's Worcester v. Georgia. The second event is the Indian Removal Act. That is a separate event than Worcester v. Georgia. And that's where they authorize the removal of Native tribes. Okay, so you have to remember this is against the wishes of the Supreme Court. Against the wishes of the Supreme Court. So those are 2 separate events. 2 separate events. Don't conflate those as one thing. Because in Worcester v. Georgia, they say the federal government has this authority, but we have a treaty, so you can't do it. But then in the Indian Removal Act, they go ahead and do it anyway. So if you're thinking that's one thing, it's going to confuse because on the one hand, Worcester v. Georgia is saying no, and the Indian Removal Act is saying yes. So they're literally 2 different positions on the same topic of removal of the Native Americans. And then the Indian Removal Act will lead to the Trail of Tears, which again is a separate event. The Indian Removal Act causes the Trail of Tears, but it's not the same thing as the Trail of Tears. And the Trail of Tears is where they actually resettle the Indians in Oklahoma. They're actually going to resettle the Indians in Oklahoma. All right. So those are 3 separate events related to the Native Americans and Andrew Jackson. So I want to start with that because I just noticed on our essays, when we wrote our essays about Andrew Jackson, a lot of us took those 3 things and made it one event, but there's 3 separate events. That's 3 separate events. Okay, So other things about Andrew Jackson, one thing we talked about quite a bit is how he increases suffrage. He increases suffrage. And remember, we said suffrage is the right to vote. So we always draw the little, you can draw the little ballot box there with that. With the word vote on the front and put a happy face. It's a good thing. Sounds like a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. And he increases suffrage by reducing qualifications. And specifically property ownership. So he increases suffrage by reducing qualifications, specifically the property ownership qualification. Previously, you had to be a white landowning male. He's going to make it so you just have to be a white male. He's going to drop the landowning qualification, the property ownership qualification. Okay, this is also called Jacksonian democracy. This is also called Jacksonian democracy. That whole idea that we want to increase suffrage. So how does Jacksonian democracy increase suffrage? It does it by reducing the qualifications for voting. This is a really important topic, okay? Because we're going to be talking about suffrage, the right to vote, with lots of different groups. African Americans trying to get the right to vote, women trying to get the right to vote. So it's important we understand that suffrage is this right to vote. So again, we're going to increase suffrage by reducing qualifications, specifically property ownership. So this is going to open the door, and a lot of you talked about this in your essays. This is going to open the door for many, many more people to vote. All right, and he calls that Jacksonian democracy. So notice how there's a potential like two-step question there, where they're like, what is the long-term effect of Jacksonian democracy? Well, it reduces property qualifications because you go from step, what is Jacksonian democracy? Well, it's increasing suffrage. How do we increase suffrage? By reducing property qualifications. Okay, property, not people. Property, not people. Okay. Let's see. And then we've got just the basics about him. He was the first Democrat, and he was considered to be the common man president. Remember, we talked about his inaugural party that he had in the White House that caused everybody to kind of trash the White House. Okay. And then the spoils system. He does the spoils system. And remember, this is sort of a knowing what it is and knowing the effect. So what is the spoils system? That's rewarding your friends with government jobs. And watch for the synonyms. Okay, they might not say jobs, they might say appointments, they might say positions, they might say careers. So there's a lot of different ways you can say the word job. So watch for those synonyms, okay, synonyms. And then what is the effect of that? Well, the effect of that is that there's going to be a reduced trust in government. People aren't going to trust government. Okay, so we got cause over here and effect. We're going to get a reduced trust in government because people aren't going to trust government if you're only getting your job because you're friends with somebody. Okay, so there's public servants. The public servants is another way for that's a government worker. Public servant is somebody who works in the government. So that's another way of looking at that. Okay. Covered that. Oh, and then the other really, really big one is the nullification crisis. Okay. And this is one that students really struggle with, is the nullification crisis. Thank you. So remember when in our classroom, when we do nullify, we do cancel. We're going to nullify, we're going to cancel, okay? Other words for cancel or overturn. You want to overturn a law. Okay, so the nullification crisis is this thing with South Carolina, where South Carolina doesn't like the tariff. So South Carolina is like trying to overturn the tariff law or cancel the tariff law. And so Andrew Jackson says, I'm going to send the military in. Nullification is to cancel or overturn a law. So if I said, I don't like these clear backpacks, I'm going to nullify that rule and we're not going to follow it in my classroom. So I'm going to overturn that rule in my classroom. Okay, so that's what nullification is. And that's why it's the nullification crisis, because that's what South Carolina was trying to do. It all revolves around that action they were trying to take. They were trying to take this action of nullifying a law. Okay, and Andrew Jackson threatens them and says, I'm going to send in the military. Because it's this question of, can a state overturn a federal law or not? So again, you've got the nullification crisis is this thing going on with South Carolina, okay, where they don't want the tariffs, and so they want to overturn or they want to cancel the law. All right, and Andrew Jackson's going to threaten them with military retribution. And the whole thing is this question of, can a state overturn a federal law or not? And remember, we talked about how this is going to be a question that continues to kind of plague us all the way up until the Civil War. It's going to continue to plague us all the way up until the Civil War. So it's ongoing. It's an ongoing problem. So that's why it's such a big, important one. That's why the nullification crisis is so important. Is when we talk about the causes of the Civil War, this nullification crisis is one of those causes. Because we're asking this question, can a state overturn a federal law or not? Okay, can a state overturn a federal law or not? And remember, not everybody liked Andrew Jackson. Some people called him King Andrew because they thought he was abusing his powers. And we saw political cartoons about all these topics. Okay. Let me double check my list. Oh, the bank. Okay. The bank is the other one, which is he vetoes the Second National Bank. And that's really all it is. With that one, there's not as much to the story. It's really just, that's what he does. He vetoes the Second National Bank. And it's a story about him being, kind of powerful and using his power to do what he wants to do. Okay, so again, here we go. Andrew Jackson, I do what I want, Jackson, number 7. Okay, you have the business with the Native Americans. You have Worcester v. Georgia, won't go. The federal government has authority over the Indians. The federal government has authority over the Indians. We have a treaty with them, and we can't break the treaty just whenever we feel like it. We have a treaty. So that's saying, no, you can't kick the Indians off. And we have the Indian Removal Act. These are two separate things, which is a law that says, yes, you can kick the Indians off their land. You can relocate them, okay? You can remove them. There's two words there. There's removal and relocation. So we're going to remove you and relocate you to a new place. So if I remove you from my classroom Maybe I just remove you for a little while and then you come back in. Or maybe I remove you and relocate you to DMC. Okay, so there's removal and relocation. So they're going to remove them with the Indian Removal Act, and then they'll relocate them in the Trail of Tears. So removal and relocation are two ideas here. Okay. They resettle them in Oklahoma. And that's why in Worcester v. Georgia, for won't go, there's an arrow going from the G to the O. Okay. They went from Georgia and Alabama and Florida, several places, and they go to Oklahoma. They go to Oklahoma. And remember, Oklahoma's right above Texas. If you were to see a map and it was asking you to identify what's going on here. So why did they do all that? Just to kind of remember, what is all of that about? What is that whole thing about? Well, it's just about land. Like, what causes this whole issue? And so that the cause is we want the land, the farmable land, so we can farm on this land. So they love to ask cause and effects questions, and they love to ask questions that make you prove that you understand the cause and effect. So that, you know, the cause of all of this, three different events, the cause of these three different events is that they want the farmable land. They want the natural resources. Okay. And then, you know, he's the first Democrat. He's the common man's president. He has the spoils system, which is where you're putting your friends in positions of power. So you're appointing them to political positions, and then people aren't going to trust government. They're not going to trust people in public service, which is another way to say people in the government, public servants. And then, you know, the nullification crisis. So I'm just going to go over this one more time. Look at that. Okay. And that's all Andrew Jackson. Okay. And that's approximately, not exactly, but that's approximately half the test right there. Boom. Andrew Jackson. The events that happen, so much happens under this guy. And a lot of it's controversial. And a lot of it is like, this causes this. This causes this. We want this land. So all this stuff happens with the Indian. The spoil system is going to make people not trust the government. Okay. He vetoes the national bank. All right. And then all of this is going to cause people to feel like he's abusing his power. Vetoing the national bank makes people feel like he's abusing his power. South Carolina helps us lead to the Civil War because it's asking this question: can a state nullify a law? In this time period, we don't know the answer to that. States say yes, federal government says no. It's an argument we're going to keep having until the Civil War. All right. The other topic on this test is westward expansion. And manifest destiny. And these two are intertwined. These are two different things, but they're intertwined. Both of them are about this move from east to west. Okay. Westward expansion is about the actual practical aspects of it. The fact that we steadily increase in size and population over the course of like 70 years. And then the other one, manifest destiny, is the idea or the belief that there's this kind of spiritual calling for us to go west. That there's this, there's some spiritual level to it. Like, we're called into the West. We're going to bring progress to the West. We're going to bring technology to the West. We are meant to go west. Okay. And that's the idea of manifest destiny. You think manifest, we're meant to go. Okay. And destiny, that you're meant to do something. Or we're like called to it. And we're going to bring, and you always think of that picture with the floating chick, right? And she's wearing white and she kind of looks somewhat angelic, and she's floating across the land, and she's bringing the technology with her through the telegraph wire. And you see all the people heading west in covered wagons and stagecoaches and trains. And the picture goes from light to dark, light where she's been, dark where she's going, because she's bringing progress with her west. So that picture really encapsulates this idea of manifest destiny. So manifest destiny and westward expansion are just tangled up together. They both contribute to each other. The fact that we get the Louisiana Purchase helps lead to manifest destiny. The fact that we suddenly feel called to go west leads to us getting all this other land. And every time we get new land, it makes manifest destiny grow. So they're like feedback on each other. And no, you're awesome, bro. No, you're awesome. No, you're awesome. No, you're awesome. Until they're both kind of fulfilled in that final piece of the Gadsden Purchase. So we're going to just kind of go through the major pieces of westward expansion, okay, and go through the major pieces of westward expansion. The first one being, so you have the original country, which if you look at your map you did when we did the blended learning stations, and the teacher station was or mini lesson was a map, and we filled that out together. You may have done it differently if you're not in my class, but we filled that map out with all the pieces. The East Coast is like a heart, like the two pieces that start the country. It looks like a heart when you put those two pieces together. Okay, so you have where the 13 colonies were, and then where the Northwest territories were, and all that stuff we get after the Revolution. You can make that into a little heart. So that's the original country that we start with. Okay, and it's right next to the Atlantic Ocean. Duh. And then in 1803, we get the Louisiana Purchase. And that's a hot date, so you do actually need to know 1803. None of the other dates specifically matter except for you to know what order they're in. Like this is first, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, et cetera, et cetera. And we get the Louisiana Purchase, and that's like the middle part of the country. Okay, all the way through to the Rocky Mountains over here, and it kind of stops at Texas down here. And then we get Florida. And you guys are going to have to forgive my horrible artwork here. And I am going to specifically mention the treaties. I'll give you a reprieve. There's no treaties on this test, but one of these treaties will be on STAR. At least one of these treaties is on STAR every year. We never know which one it's going to be, and there's just 3 treaties to know. Two treaties actually. Sorry, 2 treaties to know. So it's not that difficult. So Florida, that's the Adams-Onis Treaty. And that's our second land acquisition. And again, we kind of stop there for a bit until the idea of manifest destiny is like, go further, get more, get more. And so we end up getting, the next thing that we get is Texas. And that one is an annexation. You learned that last year, all about the annexation of Texas. Okay. Then we get the Oregon Territory up in the corner, Oregon Country. And we get that from Britain. That was one of the most missed questions on the 10-question quiz y'all took on Monday. You took a 10-question quiz. And the most missed question was about the Oregon Country. And the Oregon Country is shared with the British. We share it with the British. It's not a Native American reservation. It's shared with the British, and then we take it over in the end. Then we have the Mexican-American War, and we get the Mexican Cession. I'm going to cede something to you. I'm going to give you something. The Mexican Cession. Like if somebody loses an election, they give a concession speech because they're giving up that you won. Okay. And then the Mexican Cession is like, you got to kind of know where it is. Okay. Over here. And that's the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So that's our other treaty. So that's our Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That's our other treaty. And that's where we get California, and that sets us up for the gold rush. It's the Mexican Cession is going to set us up for the gold rush. We get California, New Mexico, Colorado's in there. So that's that territory right here, okay? And then last but not least, we're going to get the Gadsden Purchase. And again, my drawing is not super accurate. The Gadsden Purchase is sort of right here. And the only reason we get the Gadsden Purchase is because of the railroad. That's what it's all about. We want to finish the Transcontinental Railroad. Okay, we want to finish the Transcontinental Railroad. We can't go over the Rocky Mountains. Remember, the gold rush happens, California gold rush happens, and everybody wants to go to California. Okay, and they don't want to get caught in the mountains and die. So, the Rocky Mountains are being like here, you can't get to California without going over them unless we have the Gadsden Purchase, which is this piece of flat desert land. It's really not good for anything except a railroad. It's not very good farmland. It's not very good. It doesn't have a beach. It doesn't really have a lot of rivers. The Gadsden Purchase is just this piece of hot, flat land that we buy for $10 million just so we can finish a railroad. So we buy it for $10 million just so we can finish a railroad. So that's all the pieces of westward expansion. And your map should be labeled with all of this information as well. It's on page 144, I think, in my class. Maybe it's 142 maybe. So if you want to refer to your map, which was probably slightly better drawn. So let's talk about some of the causes and effects. First of all, manifest destiny and westward expansion are constantly contributing to each other. So they're constantly contributing to each other. They're interwoven. So I could ask about all these different puzzle pieces and then ask you a question and it leads to manifest destiny. Or I could ask you about them all and it could lead to westward expansion because those are twisted up together. All right. This is a really good opportunity for them to throw a map question in there. Can you identify which area is the Oregon country? Can you identify which area is the Mexican cession? Can you identify which area is Texas? I hope you can. Can you identify which area is the Louisiana Purchase? This is a really great opportunity for a map question. So I would definitely, and then everything has a pretty simple story of why we got it. We got the Louisiana Purchase, okay, for the land. We wanted the land. Mexican cession we got after a war. The Gadsden Purchase is the funny one because we got it just because we wanted this railroad. This random piece of land we get just because we want this railroad. And then obviously, so that's kind of the causes of all this. And the effects of all this is going to be land and job opportunities. Land and job opportunities. Okay, so again, these cause all of this, and then all of this leads to land. You remember, and they might not use the word land, they might say natural resources. They might say agricultural opportunities. Maybe they don't want to use the word land because they think it's too easy. Maybe they do use the word land, okay? Just watch out for the synonyms. In every test, you got to watch for the synonyms, okay? Government jobs, appointed positions, land, natural resources, okay? So just because you don't see the exact words we use in class, you've got to think through your synonyms. Okay. Which is going to lead us to the people that moved west. And this is what we covered on Monday in class, is these kind of the groups. So this is going to lead to land and job opportunities. Well, that's going to be pull factors. Remember, 6th grade, you learned about push factors and pull factors. Land and job opportunity is going to create pull factors for different groups. And we talked about several groups, but I'm going to focus on the immigrant groups, okay? I remember immigrant, you put the box around the IM, you put the box around migrant, and it means you're moving from one country to a different country. You see the word migrant, that's inside the country. So the Mormons went to Salt Lake City, they were a migrant group. The 49ers who go to California for the gold rush after we get it in the Mexican cession, that's a migrant group. Okay, we're going to focus on our immigrant groups come from one country to another country, and there's just two. And one is the Chinese, and one is the Irish. Okay, and the Chinese are really coming for those economic opportunities. The fancy way of saying jobs. And they end up mostly working on the railroads. But as the West kind of booms and suddenly they need a lot of people there, it makes sense for the Chinese to come across the Pacific Ocean and take some of those economic opportunities. And the Irish are primarily coming because of the potato famine. Okay. Which is leading to major starvation in their country. And the Chinese are really coming to the West Coast, and the Irish are really coming to the East Coast. So those are the two immigrant groups we're going to primarily talk about. All right. And last but certainly not least, I'm just going to go over our Supreme Court cases one more time, all four of them. At any point, you should expect on any test, we might drop in a Supreme Court case. This is somewhere that students really struggle, is understanding the differences between these Supreme Court cases. So remember Marbury versus Madison. Marbury v. Madison. MJMR. That establishes judicial review. And then you have Gibbons v. Ogden. I realize it's called Go. And then we make a little boat. Go and trade. And then you've got McCulloch v. Maryland. Okay. Which we call McMoney. And they were trying to tax the bank. So we draw a little bank. And then the last one right now, there's more coming up in class, Worcester v. Georgia. That's won't go. And notice how this Worcester v. Georgia kind of hits in two ways, because it's a Supreme Court case and it's part of Andrew Jackson. So it's a pretty important topic in that regard. So it hits kind of in two ways. Okay. And remember, all of these are about federal power. Federal is strong. Draw my little strong man right here. State does not get any power. They're weak. They're sad about that. Makes me happy. They're very weak. And all of that's because they're all John Marshall cases. They're all cases of Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice John Marshall. So these are our four Supreme Court cases that are always fair game at this point. And every time we add a Supreme Court case, we're bringing them all back in, because students have really struggled with these court cases in the past. So again, Marbury versus Madison, MJMR, judicial review. Gibbons v. Ogden, go and trade. And we have the picture of the boat because it was talking about internet trade between on the waters. And then an interstate trade. Okay. And then McCulloch versus Maryland is McMoney. And we got the little bank. And then Worcester v. Georgia's won't go with the arrows. All federal over state and all John Marshall cases. This is the anchor chart that's up in my room right now. Questions? I'm going to take questions for about 5 minutes and then we're going to call it. I'm going to show, while I'm waiting for questions, I'm going to show all of the papers I wrote on one more time. What pages in the spirals would you recommend? If you're in my class, it's all the pages for this unit. It starts on page, we just added page 144, but we're passing back the quiz tomorrow. That'll get taped in. we're passing back the, I think it starts on page like 136-ish. You should have in my class, I gave you the TEEX chart, and then so everything after that TEEX page for this unit. And the TEEX page is always a great place to check. And I'm sorry, I don't have my spiral here with me today. TEEX page is always a great place for you to check. If you're not in my class and you want to swing by and look at my page numbers, I've got that up at the front of the room. If you are in my class, just check the list that's right next to the Promethean board. It lives there. It's got all the page numbers, exactly what should be on that page. And those are what we're studying. Okay, Tanner, Gibbons v. Ogden, go and trade. Guy named Gibbons sues a guy named Ogden because he says you're not being fair about trade. But what it boils down to is only the federal government can regulate interstate trade. So if you think I-10 interstate, it goes between states. So if you're trading between Texas and Oklahoma, you're trading between New York and New Mexico, you're trading between South Dakota and South Carolina. Only the federal government can regulate that. Okay, so this is the one about trade. And this is where students get super confused is they want to switch these all the time. But that's why we have Gibbons v. Ogden is go and trade. You have to go and trade. And McCulloch versus Maryland's make money. Okay, that's about the federal bank. That's about federal institutions. And all of them have the same effect, which is federal power over state power. All four right now. Luckily, that part's easy. All four have the same effect right now. Mo, no problem, Tanner. Okay, what else can I answer for you? I'm going to show you all the papers one more time. So this is all our number 7 Andrew Jackson notes. Pay attention to causes and effects. Watch for synonyms. Just because they don't use the word job on the test doesn't mean that the question's a lot harder. They're just trying to test that you understand the concept. So do you understand that appointed to a federal position or appointed government position or political position or public servant all means the same thing? Okay, all means the same thing. So Worcester v. Georgia, this is what happens is we have the whole argument that Georgia wants the land, so the white Americans want the land that's owned by the Indians. So they try to kick them out. They sue Georgia, the Native Americans sue Georgia, and the Supreme Court says that the federal government has authority over the Native Americans. Only the federal government. State governments cannot kick out the Indians. Only the federal government has authority over the Native Americans. And furthermore, we have a tribe with these people, so you can't just kick them out. Oh, not a tribe. We have a treaty. We have a treaty with these people, so you can't just kick them out. So because of that treaty, you can't just kick them out. So it's saying we won't go. They won't go. Now, Andrew Jackson's going to ignore that because you have kind of two sides to the argument. You have the Supreme Court case that's saying, no, you can't kick them out. And we put the arrows from the G to the O because when they do get moved, they go from Georgia to Oklahoma. They go from Georgia to Oklahoma. So this is saying, no, you can't move them. And then the Indian Removal Act is saying, yes, you can move them. And then the Trail of Tears is when they actually move. So these are 3 different events. No, you can't. Yes, you can actually do it. So this is saying, yeah, you can remove those Indians. Let's go resettle them somewhere else. Relocate or resettle them somewhere else. Other questions? All right. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you have other questions, feel free to email me, amy.foster-munoz at cfisd.net. Wednesday, don't forget, is a tutoring day. So if you want to stay for tutoring with any of your U.S. history teachers, we should all be available. So you can stay for tutoring to study for the test. You can stay for tutoring to make up or redo any work. Remember, this is your last test of the grading period. We take this test on Thursday. Obviously, there's no tutoring on Friday. And then next week is the week before spring break. So just keep in mind that that's going to be then the last week to sort of fix your grade. Once you head off to spring break, it's too late. That grade is done. And we move into the very last portion of our year. So we're at over 100 days into the school year, guys. We're at like 100 and I don't remember exactly, but we're over 100 days into the school year. This grading period's almost over. We're going to leave with only one left. So it's really important that you do well this grading period to root your spring semester grade, because now you're really looking at, am I going to qualify for K-level classes? Am I going to qualify for AP classes? Am I going to be forced into remedial classes because I'm not making the grades necessary? I'm not passing the STAR test. You really got to start looking at how what you're doing now affects your future. Just like we look at how what we did in history affects our present day. Have a great night.